Hi everyone, Hayden, Garrett here with Parker Executive Search. Excited to join you today with good friends Chris King, the Director of Athletics at UT Rio Grande Valley, as well as Justin Sell, the Director of Athletics at South Dakota State University. And today our topic is mentorship, right? And mentoring your A players, everything that entails. And without further ado, we're going to dive right in, guys. Appreciate the time today.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Awesome. So first thought for you is a couple of ideas, but it's really, what attributes stand out to you guys in A players? How do you find those attributes in your teammates, in the folks that report into you? And then do any of those kind of come through in the interview process?
Yeah, I think, for me, first and foremost, it's our job is to model those attributes, hopefully,
Sure.
if you're trying to encourage others to be able to continue to think about careers and growth and opportunity. And I think, when I think the attribute piece of it, certainly integrity, wanting to be part of something bigger than yourself, being a lifelong learner is super critical, building capacity. And then I think maybe the most underrated is style. The style that you have and how you deal with people is super, super important. And I think, as you look at those attributes, and especially as you get into an interview process, hopefully you're out recruiting and you're recruiting people that have some of those attributes. And those are certainly defining characteristics before you even get into their talent, skills, and what their experiences are.
Sure.
Yeah, I think at UTRGV, as far as what we look for as far as fit for our culture, is really what our core values are: accountability, integrity, as just indicated, our pursuit of excellence, as well as service. And with service, is how are you engaging and communicating with your constituents or stakeholders, and in some cases with external, the donor base. With accountability, we look at how are they balancing being plan and task oriented. Pursuit of excellence. We have very comprehensive strategic planning process, and we have 20 to 25 core priorities every year. And so, how are they handling being plan and task oriented? We have a mantra of plan, execute, create results. And so, when we're looking for a fit in those attributes, really they have to be able to fit into those core values. And as we get on the back end of it, and we look at performance measurements, we look at evidence of strong leadership and interpersonal skills and communications. We look at their commitment to customer service. Their administrative skills, fiscal skills, all those different attributes that really what I think make up your A players and your executive staff.
Right. So I want to dive just for 1 second for our audience here back into that interview process and how you really identify the attributes of an A player in the interview process. Are there certain questions you ask? Are you more concerned about character over competency? Give me a few thoughts on kind of that interview process and identifying those traits.
I think that 99% of our research is done before the candidate actually shows up.
Sure.
We do a heck of a lot of reference calls and people we trust. And most of the time, if I'm looking at an A player, whether it's an executive staff member or head coach, I'm probably not interviewing somebody unless I know somebody and trust them implicitly that has recommended them. Can't speak for Justin, but I know with us, we have 5 executive staff members. I've got 11 head coaches. And so I've got to go 16-0. If I go 15-1, I failed because we're a smaller 1 AAA department. And so we really look for someone who's a fit for our culture. I've been an AD now for 9 years, going on my 10th year, and so I know what works at UTRGV. I know what works in our region. I know what works at our university. And so it's imperative to get the right people on board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, you're interviewing for all kinds of different levels, and frankly, sometimes you're interviewing really within or who you're going to promote. And so we're in that business always of trying to identify those characteristics of the people that can move up. And,
right.
And so with your research and getting to know people and being at a convention, whether you're looking for a position or not, you're trying to really understand who's out there, who's talented, who has that spark,
right.
Who can do those other things, who has a great style. And then you'll dive into those other experience characteristics, but I think there's the feel part about it, and then understanding where you're at, what part of the country you're at, and what style fits for that part of the country. You can have really good administrators that are A people that may not fit with your donor base, your fan base, your university, and so I think those are some really key characteristics that we look at through that process.
Right, awesome. Yeah, appreciate the thoughts. Next realm that I want to go down here, for your top talent, for your top administrators, what steps are you taking to kind of chart their path, either through your organization or through the industry? How do you help them think about their career path going forward?
Yeah, for me, I think first I went through it. I think, and being able to talk to them about that and sit in their shoes and still be able to connect with them on a basis that I care, and I care about what they're trying to do in their profession, and then creating a comfort level that we can have those discussions, and that you can have them certainly in formal evaluation processes, but that you have those discussions as you move through different parts of the year and different parts of their career. And then I think, at the end of the day, we talk often about trying to help somebody reach their full potential. And for me, it's those conversations and really trying to change what they think their full potential is, because I think that's when you get into the interesting part. And when you talk about type people or people that are going to achieve at a high level, it's those that can figure out how to take it to a different level.
Right.
Yeah, and for us, 2 years ago, we put in a core priority where we were going to develop more of a personal and professional development program. It's something we didn't do probably the first 7 years when I was the athletic director, enough of. You're mentoring every day, on-the-job learning, job shadowing within your executive staff. But we put in a formal process for that. And so now I'll sit down with each of the executive staff members, and we'll meet once every 8 weeks, specifically on personal and professional development, on leadership development. And so, I've asked them initially, 2 years ago, we still have continuity with the same folks, what are your personal goals for the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years? What are your professional goals for the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years? What are your career aspirations? And, what is your own personal and professional development plan for those that report directly to you? And so we track that now on a regular basis. And part of our, they pick different activities that they want to be able to improve in, or things that they're interested in. And I think it's been great because it's opened up the communication. It's allowed us to be a little more inclusive and collaborative as a team. And so I think it's been really good for our staff. And now it's not just with the executive staff, the A players, they're also doing that with the senior staff. And the senior staff does it with the sports staff. And then our sport administrators and myself work with the head coaches. The head coach works with the assistant coach. So it's part of who we are. It's ingrained into how we deal with our personal and professional development within our department.
Yeah, great insight. Really appreciate the thoughts there. And I'll go a bit further. You sort of hit on this, but I'm going to continue down the path. What other, whether it's personal, professional resources, are you pulling together, where it's working with donors, coming to events like NACTA, et cetera? What are you able to put together to provide the most effective curriculum for your A players to continue to develop, right? So you mentioned the chemistry and putting in these core values. Maybe a little more tactically, are you able to give them more scope and more responsibility? Just tell me how you think about providing effective learning experiences for your A players.
Well, I look at it more from an external and an internal perspective.
Yeah.
So externally, in regards to conferences, every one of my A players, they go to at least one conference every year, whether it's CALS or NACTA or women's leaders. There are mentoring opportunities. I'm the chair of the 1AAA mentoring committee, and so each one of them has gone through, and we've chosen another athletic director to work with them, which is good because they get tired of hearing from me all the time. There's just a lot of different ways externally.
Right.
Committee work. I have my two senior female administrators are both on NCAA committees, the men's and women's tennis committee and the women's volleyball committee. And so there's a lot of ways externally they can get that experience. But internally, again, I go back to, we spend a lot of time on the on-the-job learning. And we are very inclusive and collaborative in how we do our strategic planning, our core priorities. And so we have 6 of us in the room. I mean, we do, what we call 30, 60, 90-day plan meetings once a month where I meet with them individually. And then they meet as a group with myself, more of a peer accountability, and we're always working 90 days in advance. But then in that group meeting, they're talking about the next 30 days and how they can be collaborative, inclusive, and how they can work together. So I think they get the job shadowing inside our program, and it's been incredible for all of them, because they always say, I want to learn about academics, or I want to learn about compliance, or I want to learn about fundraising.
Right.
And they're learning it in-house. Everybody wants to go to a conference. It's, it's the cool thing to do, and, but we're learning it together, and it's a really good thing that we've put in place. And I mean, there's a lot of other things we do.
Sure.
We bring in outside speakers. I mean, Kevin DeShazo from Culture wins championships. He comes in. We've done personality and traits assessment. I mean, we've read books together. I mean, put learning plans in. So I mean, a big part of what I focus on is the leadership development of our staff and those A players, and it's successful because they're elevating our program. I mean, I spend most of my time at the 30,000 feet level, and they run the department.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris covered most of the areas that you can get into. We, obviously send articles and information of the day, hot topics, and being involved in Division I Council and some other things, I'm able to bring back some of those areas that we're working on in real time and get those folks be at the table, to learn those issues and to be able to contribute. And then the only other one I would add, I think not forgetting the communities we live in. I think there's some tremendous experiences that get involved, and it ends up helping us with the work we do on behalf of our universities, certainly on behalf of our athletic departments. But I think that's an underutilized place to get some great experience, to have to work with others, to make the place you live better. And it kind of expands on that ability to get into national committees or to come to NACDA to present at conferences and do some of those things. I think that's another area that I encourage my folks to do. And then the last piece is just continuing to model that behavior,
right.
And being able to show them a path, and then hopefully you're sparking an interest in them to understand why those skills and experiences are important for them.
Right. We were joking a minute ago. You mentioned that one of the best things you can do is be an A player yourself, right? And I like that. I like that. Next question, the idea of mentorship. Well, I guess before we get into that, let's go with this. How do you measure the growth and progress of your A players? You mentioned periodic, formal review processes, maybe informal reviews. Maybe give us some examples of the metrics that you're tracking to help continue the progress of your A players.
Yeah, I think, and there's a lot of kind of tried and true methods that you formally follow. Certainly sitting down every year and setting goals. We try to do something at the beginning of the year, kind of revisit it the middle of the year, and then evaluate it at the end of the year. And so you're setting up those pieces. But I think the most important thing, honestly, in terms of progression and ability to grow within an organization, and then certainly to go on and hopefully become athletic directors, I think you have to earn the respect of those around you. It's not about me granting a title or granting responsibility. It's about those folks understanding they've got to gain respect of others. Others are the ones that are going to end up being able to elevate them into those positions because they'll want to follow them as a leader. And so I think those are some pieces that I spend a little more time, maybe more on the art side of it than the science side.
Mm-hmm. And I'm probably going to sound more like textbook.
Yeah.
Something we did, I think it was in my 4th year, I had a career coach come in, we did some things a little differently. We actually defined their roles and responsibilities right off the bat. So they understand what their roles are. We define what their specific tasks, their duties, so they understand. And we go through, again, the 30, 60, 90-day planning. And so through the meeting process, I'm constantly evaluating them. I'm providing them assessment on their skill sets, blind spots potentially. I've always said that if you get to the end of the year and you're doing a performance review and they're shocked, then you've done a poor job as an athletic director in communicating with them, where they could improve that. And so I think we work a lot on our developing meaningful relationships, both on and off campus. I think that's a big part of how we do that as well. And then the performance measures, some of them are quantitative, some are qualitative. It's a little easier with external, providing metrics for the external side, whether it's ticket sales or corporate sales or on the development side. But again, it's a constant evaluation, particularly through our strategic planning process and core priorities, because they have ownership in those core priorities every year. They have split them up 3 or 4 each as part of our short and intermediate long-term planning. And so we're constantly making sure they're timely on their projects, that they're progressing the way they should, what's working, what's not working. And so I think it's a kind of a year-long evaluation until you get to that end of the year performance review.
Mm-hmm. As far as mentoring your A players, what is one idea or principle that you wish you would have learned maybe a little earlier in your career that you realized later that you now employ? What would have been helpful to know earlier on so that you guys would have been more effective mentors?
Well, I can speak for myself. When I became an athletic director, it was about the middle of my 3rd year. I was burnt out. And so it's really not about me, it's about them. But the reason I'm saying this, it leads to them, is because I was burnt out. And so when I brought this career coach in to kind of take a look at what we were doing, he was coming, I thought he was going to spend 2 days evaluating my staff. He said, no, I'm spending 2 days with you. If I can't change you and your leadership development, then you're not going to be able to change them and their leadership development, what direction you want them to go in. And so what I learned was I was acting as if I was the associate AD at Alabama still, rather than the director of athletics. And so I shifted my focus into more the 30,000 feet level, the planning part of it, the vision, the growth of the program. I focused more on the values, the beliefs, the developing of relationships, where you had then our staff then would deal more with the day-to-day operations, delegate out the authority to them. And so now what I find myself in is, because as we've elevated our program, I've elevated the talent that I have on my executive staff. And so with them, I'm doing that with them the same he did with me. And so I want them to be more plan-oriented rather than being in the weeds and being task-oriented. And so one of the things I think with the mentoring part of it, and I spend an awful lot of time, some of them are really good at it, and some of them are still learning. And so I'm trying to make them better administrators so they put themselves in positions for jobs at FBS schools or athletic director positions down the road.
Yeah, and I think, I was fortunate to work under some really, really good people. Taught me a lot of great lessons. Worked for some that weren't as good, and I think you learn just as much in kind of creating your own style and where you want to be. But probably the one that I think I would pass to others is having patience and working through. It's okay to be in a job for 3 years and master it. It's okay to take some time in your progression, because at the end of the day, you're building capacity. And I was fortunate to become the AD at South Dakota State. I was 40 years old, and when I thought about that, 70 hours a week, I didn't have 18 years of experience, I had 30, and so when you think about that, it's those repetitive experiences. And so in my young 30s, I thought I could do it, and so you're trying to always push, you're trying to always move forward. And I think having the patience within that to know that there's a development process in that. You're not stalling, you're just gaining capacity. In our jobs, it's probably the most understated term that's out there, is you have to have capacity to deal in so many different areas and with so many different constituencies. And if you don't take the proper time to do that, it's hard to get out of that and be able to spend time mentoring. And then on the mentor side for me is just kind of creating hopefully some guidelines around some core values that are important, but then working with people individually. They all have different personalities and different ways of going about problem solving, and teams are great when you have that. So how do you maximize that, and how do I not make them all be a just and sell, but how can they be their best version of themselves when they go out?
Awesome. Guys, it's been great insight. Appreciate the thoughts. I want to end with this question. You've heard it before, but for the audience out there, talk about one or two of the most influential mentors in your career, in your lives, and maybe what you learned from those individuals.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just starting out in the business, Dave White, I was a senior associate AD at Villanova University. He came from being a football coach, so he had kind of the coaching side. And he had a great style and built a great culture, trust. He cared about me, and I knew it. And then he challenged me to get better, and became a father figure, still is today, somebody that I certainly lean on. And then you have your networks personally, within your own family. And I had great mentors and leaders within my family that I think helped set my values, have always kept me grounded, have always had my best interests, and they're my biggest fans. And I think it helps push you forward and makes you want to do great things.
Yeah, and for me, very similar. I had two athletic directors that were former coaches, Steve Sloan, who was the athletic director of Central Florida, and then Mal Moore, who was the athletic director at Alabama. And what was unique is they'd be the first to tell you they weren't great athletic directors, but they were phenomenal at fundraising. Their people skills were incredible, and I came up through compliance. So to be able to watch them and how they deal with people, so when I did become an athletic director, I was able to go out and raise money and know how to say the certain things when you're in front of people, and the people skills that you develop. It was the other side of when I was coming up through internally that I watched them externally. That was able to be able to pattern that whenever I became the athletic director. But they were just two incredible individuals that everybody loved. And they were sort of like second fathers to me, so I was fortunate to work under them.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, guys, Justin, Chris, can't thank you enough for your time. This has been great. I think very valuable for the audience out there. Again, Hayden, Garrett at Parker Executive Search. Hope you guys were able to learn a thing or two. And on behalf of ADU, appreciate you watching, and tune in for the next one.